Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, New England. There's a fragment of a story, barely a folk tale, about a kingdom on the shore of the Black Sea called England. And it's an odd little saga kernel. Basically, in the 11th century, a group of Saxons fled the Norman invasion of England by putting to sea. They raided their way through the Mediterranean until they came to the aid of the Emperor of Constantinople. In exchange for their service, he granted them lands on the Black Sea coast. There are only two sources for the story. The earliest is the Chronicon Universale Anonymi Londinensis, which was written by an English monk in Picardy, and covers the history of the world until 1219. Note the suspicious date for Ars Magica purposes. The other is the Jadvarador saga, and I know I've mispronounced that. I apologise to any Icelanders. It's an Icelandic saga about the fictionalised life of Edward the Confessor. It was written in the 14th century, and it may have drawn on the previously mentioned book for some of the details, elaborating them. The saga is a little more prolix. Basically, Cedd of Gloucester leads the people who stood against the Normans into exile. In the Picardian book, he's called Standardus because it's in Latin. They are led by 3 earls and 8 barons and fill a fleet of 350 or 245 ships. On their way south, they plunder Ceuta in Africa, and then they seize the Balearic Islands. They proceed then to Sicily or Sardinia, depending on which book you read, and they continue to cause trouble until they hear that Constantinople is under siege. The English arrive and they break the siege. Alexios Komnenos, the first, offers to take them all on as royal bodyguards. Now, he died in 1118, which gives us a date range for the story. This is apparently not an origin story for the Varangian Guard, because although some English do stay on to join that group, the rest are granted land that the Empire had previously lost 6 days from the capital. They took it by force and then sent for Hungarian priests, as they didn't want to embrace Eastern Orthodoxy as their brand of Christianity. The towns in New England were named after those in the Old Country, the largest being called London. In Latin, their area is called Nova Anglia, and they are referred to as the Angli Orientals, that is, the Eastern English. The Chronicon adds that they killed an imperial messenger sent to demand tribute, which caused their brethren, who had remained in the capital, to flee to their new homeland, and then the group took up piracy. Where the English settled is an open question. Odoric Vitalis has some of them in a town called Siviltot in Anatolia, which is modern Turkey. Later historians have suggested that the current city of... Oh, here we go again. I'm hopeless with languages other than English. I do apologise. Novorossiysk? Anywho, that may have been an English town called Susico in period. Susico clearly did exist. It's on trading maps. But there are great doubts that the name actually is the word Sussex, transliterated into Greek. The maps show an area northeast of Susico called Londinia, which some claim as London. It's a river, it's called the River of Londinia, and some people claim there must have been a town called Londinia on it. Christine Fell mentions that the Vulan River might be Londinia, although it's not in the correct location compared to modern Novorossiysk. I do apologise. This puts them on the very edge of the Crimea. On the same maps, there are 2 other cities with names referring to Varangians on the Crimean Peninsula, and another one is at the mouth of the River Don, which is the river that runs into the Sea of Azov. This gives them effective control of what we now call the Kerch Strait, and control of the trade route down the Don to Constantinople. A final historical note is that the Pope sent ambassadors to the Mongols in 1241, and they passed through this area, and they described the people as Saxi, noting they were Christians, fierce warriors, and lived in fortified cities. This keeps their settlements active well past the Ars Magica start date, so if you have a covenant in Stonehenge, which is a popular choice for new groups, you might consider the emigration to the east was a covenant fleeing the Tytalus-inspired Normans. Alternatively, a covenant in the Far East and your own covenant might be linked, and emigre may have taken an arcane connection, so the two groups are able to communicate or even travel between the two sites. A spring covenant set up in eastern England might prove interesting for players. At home, in the covenant, you have English culture, which is readily understood by the players, but Outside the Covenant, you have Tatar magicians, Mongol shapeshifters, Russian forest spirits, and the ruins of the Roman province of Kherson. Across the sea is the disrupted Theban tribunal, and even closer is the proffered, but habituating, assistance of House Tremare. Your saga may vary.